I hope you've had as an enjoyable a day so far as I have. I've been to a wonderful diversity of sessions. I've heard some brilliant case studies. I've been provoked into thinking about some challenges facing impact activities. And I've really found myself writing a vast amount in my notebooks, which I think are all good things. So my job now is a lovely one, which is to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Professor Julia Black, President of the British Academy, also Strategic Director of Innovation and Professor of Law at the London School of Economics and Political Science, Senior Independent Member of the Board of the UKRI Council, a member of the Council of Science and Technology, and a member of the Board of the Courtauld Institute of Art. And Julia champions the SHAPE acronym, Social Sciences, Humanities and Arts for People and the Economy, and in particular SHAPE Innovation, illustrating the value and relevance of these subjects. And Julia chairs the Aspect Steering Group, which you'll hear more about in her presentation. And she's also a director of ZINC, a social sciences mission-based incubator. So I'm really pleased to welcome Julia to talk to us. She's going to talk for about 25-30 minutes, and then she's going to be very kindly welcoming questions at the end before finishing promptly at 4. So without any more wittering from me, Julia, take it away for us.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thank you to everybody, the organisers, for inviting me along this afternoon. And it's a huge pleasure to be with you on a rather drizzly sort of March Monday afternoon. And as Heather was saying, I've got a range of different roles, but on the research side, what they all coalesce around is around the absolute conviction that social sciences, humanities and the arts research produces the most incredible research, but also the most incredible initiatives. And that we have been doing a brilliant job, well, we've done a good job of mobilising some of those initiatives and of those ideas for public good, but there's an awful lot more that we could do. And so I've had various roles in this space, and various roles both at the LSE and at the British Academy, and as been said, at kind of the UKRI, and all of those in those space. And to be thinking, and to be honest, I get slightly irritated. There's nothing about sort of galvanising you to kind of just crack on than being irritated by the fact that social science, that innovation is so equated with science and technology and engineering, and not even particularly maths, well, other than AI. And just thinking, well, we have huge amounts of insights that come from the social sciences, humanities, and arts that are of absolute relevance to all the different challenges, initiatives that are facing the world today. And we also do have examples of how these are being mobilised and have been mobilised to really have a quite considerable public impact, social impact. But they are, I think, under-harnessed, certainly under-recognised, but I also think under-harnessed. And it was this conviction, which I'm pretty much preaching to a choir of the converted here, so I'm sure you'll pretty much agree with you because you've done self-selection bias in actually turning up, that motivated us back in 2018, 2017, to apply for Research England CCF grant, which was for university collaborations to engage in new ideas and new initiatives. So we put in a bid, LSE with Manchester and Sussex, to create a new consortia or platform. Great thing about the word platform is it means anybody to anything, anything to anybody, and has a sort of tech sort of buzz to it. But anyway, a group of universities who were really thinking quite hard about how to innovate and how to mobilise their social sciences research, as I say, for public good. And Oxford came in on that very early, and then we quickly expanded out to Cardiff and to Glasgow, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're doing in just a moment. But what I wanted to do today was just give you some examples, because it's a little bit difficult if you're just talking in abstract. So I'll give you some examples of what was around, as it were, when we were thinking about this, then some idea of what we're doing in Aspect, and some examples of some of the ventures we're supporting. We've got Chris and Julian here, who are kind of at the vanguard of that, along with other colleagues that we're supporting to mobilize those ideas, to get those out into practice, to try to scale, to make an impact, and also try and make that research sustainable. So I'll give you some little examples of what we're doing along the way, and then I'll talk about some of the few insights that we've gained through this process as to what's involved, what it takes, and how it's similar to or different from a patent-heavy traditional kind of spin-out model. And then, as I say, very happy to take questions. So let me start off just with a few examples so you can see what we are talking about. So I've skipped. So University of Oxford, I thought we should probably start with, the host, a good example from the host institution. Here, absolutely. And so smart handpumps from University of Oxford. The slide is a bit small, but I'm happy to have the slides distributed. You look at them in your leisure. But the aim here was to improve the sustainability of water supplies in rural Africa through using mobile data. And as you see, it comes out of the School of Geography and the Environment, for those of you who are here. And the development here was a type of hand pump which basically reduces the average downtime that the pump is down to less than 3 days, which is a huge improvement on the several weeks or even months previously that hand pumps would be out of order, which obviously has an enormous impact on the ability of anybody to actually get fresh water, which is rather critical. And then their findings here have influenced policy in Kenya at a national level, and the approach is being tested by UNICEF in schools in Bangladesh. So there you go. You've got an intervention here. It's based on it's based on a proper understanding of the issue and the problem. There's really strong social science research which has gone into there to understand that actually this is the nature of the problem. The type of intervention that we need is this. Then you work with, in this case, probably some engineers, I would imagine, involved in this one. Chris is nodding. Working with those geographers to develop a solution which then has a very real impact and moreover is scalable. Okay, so those are ingredients that I want you to think about and hang on to as we do this. Really strong social science research, or we'll expand into arts and humanities as well, but really strong SHAPE research base. Quite often an interdisciplinary team, working with other skills, harnessing and rolling those other disciplines into the solution to the problem which has been researched and investigated, and the relevant intervention tested through social science research, and then which is scalable and ideally sustainable in the sense that it generates sufficient income from that to be able to feed the research on a sort of research evergreen model, as it were. Okay, so we're going to move on. Just give you an idea. These are by no means exhaustive, etc., but just illustration what kind of things we're talking about. So some of these initiatives date back quite a long time. So this one is from the University of Manchester, in place of war. And as you can see, it's a global organisation now that uses the role of arts in places of conflict. So again, and it started off here with an AHRC grant back in 2004. Okay, so these are long, they can take quite a while to come to gestation, etc. And the research project there was to really investigate the role of arts in places of conflict as a conflict resolution mechanism, if you like, role of intervention. What can people who are pitted against one another, what can they find in common? Where can they find that common ground? What brings them together in a spirit of expression, in a spirit of creativity? And how does that then help address some of the ingredients of that conflict? It's obviously not a silver bullet, right? Obviously not. But again, founded on really strong, solid, funded research projects, has developed now into, as you can see, 100-strong network of international change makers based on a kind of train the trainer, as it were, model, who are supported by a small team back in the UK, who are really interesting practice-based research here going on, actually, for those of you who are interested in that field, who facilitate knowledge sharing, logistical expertise, research support for those who want to implement this in their own environments. And what they do is they're enabling grassroots change makers, as you can see there, in music, theatre, across the arts, to transform that culture of violence and suffering, as I say, into hope, opportunity, and freedom. And so they're engaging with thousands of people every year. I think they've also just agreed a £20 million agreement with a music company. So this is going from really difficult research, very difficult to get this right, this term of intervention, as you'll all be very sensitized to working up something, to taking that data back, feeding that back into the model in a very iterative process to develop an intervention which can scale in quite an innovative way. So as you can see, this is not patent spin out, right? This is a much more creative, tailored, bespoke solution to a complicated problem. And I'm going to switch completely. Okay, totally different now. So this is LSE, I have to confess. But you know, come all this way, got to bring the school with you. So what are we doing at LSE? So LSE has had a Centre Grantham Research Institute funded by philanthropy, Jeremy Grantham, for a decade or so now, a bit longer. And it works on the economics of climate change. So a School of Social Sciences, economics is on the label, as it were, and GRI, Grantham Research Institute, looks at various economics of climate change. And what they started doing back in about 2017 was actually working with the Church of England. So the Church of England is a big asset manager, big investor. And Church of England, and actually the Pensions Board of DEFRA, I won't even go into the arcane arrangements in relation to departmental pensions, but anyway, were concerned that their assets that they were managing should be invested in companies that were practicing good, sustainable policies. Their challenge was to actually identify those companies. How do you identify who is on a good pathway to transition? And so what they started working with the Grantham Institute is to develop a methodology, which is publicly accessible, for assessing that pathway to transition, starting off with the biggest fossil fuel emitters. So what we've now done at the LSE is partner with, this then got the attraction of FTSE. FTSE is obviously creates indices. You all have heard the FTSE 100, FTSE 250, the FTSE All Share, but it also has themed indices, and it's created a new index based on LSE methodology, which is the Climate Transition Index. And so what we have now is a collaboration between FTSE, who feed us data, plus the LSE's methodology and other sources of data, which produce an index of where companies are on the pathway to transition. This is now an index adopted by FTSE, so that asset managers who are interested in adopting ESG policies can use this as a factor in determining their asset allocation. It is followed by about, I think, over 200 or several hundred now fund managers, and we're for about assets of about £1 trillion now under management. So that is significant impact at scale. And again, started off as as exploratory research project, very small, literally a couple of master's students and a professor working their way to be now quite a significant and very impactful initiative. Completely different. But again, what are we still doing? Mobilising very rigorous social science research, working with partners in innovative ways to produce impact at scale, which is sustainable. Okay, key ingredients. So I mentioned that I was leading Aspect. Now, it was these kind of examples that we had in mind when pulling Aspect together and deciding to pitch for that Research England bid. And I don't think anybody from Research England is here, but I'm very grateful to them for backing this one, because it was quite high risk. Just as an aside, I don't know if any of you applied for this, quite interesting on the structure of funding. For this one, as a demand management strategy, you could only be a lead institution on one and a second institution on one other bid. So we were obviously the lead institution on this one because, you know, nobody else wanted to bet on it. And then what we had to do is find somebody else who would be prepared to place their bets, put their chips, as it were, on this being their second bid that they would go in on. So we were very grateful to the partners who did that, and then partners who came on very quickly afterwards, who've been working with, and Oxford was absolutely core, I have to say, to the development of the concept of aspect. And I always give Sam a shout out at this point because she goes very red, and that delights me enormously. And she's sitting on the steps there going very red. So there we go. And obviously Chris is here from Oxford as well. So Oxford has been very embedded in this from the outset. And where we are now, however, is we are a network of 47, I think, now organisations. We got follow-on funding from the CCF, and we also got funding from the ESRC. I don't know if Mel's here or anybody else from the ESRC, but anyway, a bit of a shout out to ESRC. There you go. Thank you very much. We'll be passing the hat around later afterwards as well, in case there's any more. To really help us expand this network and to grow this initiative. And so what do we, oh gosh, I've lost my slides down. That's a little bit alarming. They're back. Yeah, if I try to move them on, no, they disappear. Anyway, while somebody sorts out what's happened to the rest of my slides, because I can tell you who we are. So we're a partner now, an organisation. I'll just stand a little bit in the light. There we go. Which one? Perfect. We've got 47 members in the UK and internationally. Copenhagen Business School with our latest member. Leiden is in there. Brisbane is in there. And we are from across the UK. We've got 4 communities of practice. So these are mainly tech transfer, professional support staff, but into 4 streams. So there's business engagement, entrepreneurship, which focuses largely on student entrepreneurship, research commercialisation, and then communications for KE kind of activities. And so that consists of about 250 individuals now sharing knowledge, good practice. We have been running 37 different funded projects. So we went in absolutely with a spirit of experimentation and piloting. We didn't know what was going to work. We had a bid fund. As long as the bid coming in was either collaborative across the network, or there would be going to be real benefits to the network, and they were going to share those insights across the network, then we would be funding it. So we funded things. I haven't really highlighted the business engagement examples here, but we have funded student internships into business. We've funded precursors of the innovation fellow type model. We've funded internal innovation research awards for those inside universities, so they get funding for seed funding, etc. We funded a student accelerator program across the network. We funded Methods for Change, which is developing different types of methodologies which can then be used by those, particularly in the public and not-for-profit sectors, to conduct research to develop their own interventions. We've done a raft of initiatives of that nature, which is it's really piloting what works, what's the most effective. And as part of that, we've developed now over 200 resources and outputs. So we've got toolkits there, we've got learning resources, and it's all available on a website near you. If you just type in that address, which I'm sure you'll be Googling away now while I continue to rabbit on. Okay, I'm obviously pressing the wrong button as I go forward. There we go. But one of the things we have really focused on is that commercialisation element. Now, commercialisation is a bit of a dangerous term. I realise that. I realise for some there might be a kind of get out the garlic moment. That this is a word that should never pass one's lips. So I think this is possibly the first time that I've used it in this presentation so far. So you can get an awfully long way talking about what we're talking about by talking about scalability and sustainability and using different types of mechanisms. But the shorthand is commercialisation. And we developed a program initially called Success, which we then rebranded as ARC, the Aspect Research Commercialisation Accelerator. which is a 6-month program. Now, as is the way, it was beautifully designed by Chris and by somebody else called Sam Gallagher, who's moved on to worse things, obviously, the Intellectual Property Office, actually, with others. And it was designed to be a beautiful in-person program that was to be launched in, I think that will be March 2020. So anyway, very quick pivot, but clouds, silver linings, discovered that actually really improved accessibility for different academics. So those who have childcare responsibilities or other types of caring responsibilities it's paying you to move to a particular geography, no matter where it is in the country. Not everybody's always there, so it's always paying to get there. So I had to do a very quick pivot, and it's a 6-month program, which consists of a business canvas support session, so academics can really build out their ideas. It's absolutely about supporting academics to mobilise those ideas and the research, as I said. Got a virtual training boot camp spread over 3 weeks, bringing in different types of partners, industry experts, to develop key entrepreneurial skills. Academics go into academia because they like writing and researching, possibly a bit of teaching, but they don't really go into academia because they're budding entrepreneurs. That's not your natural pathway. So, which is fair enough. But to develop key entrepreneurial skills. But as I've been speaking to our PhD students actually about this, actually academics do really have entrepreneurial skills, because what do? You research new ideas, you test the market, which is you work out where's your gap in the literature. That's your market testing. You develop your proof of concept, you harden it, you hone it through conferences, through peer review, you get endless feedback. You have to pivot, I don't know how many different times, before you can come up with a new idea, which you then market and sell back out through those conferences, etc. So, is it so different? I'm not sure. We could have a different conversation about that. But it's taking those kind of the skills you really need as an entrepreneur, and then giving also specialised sector-specific training, and additionally access to experts who've been there before, because these are new networks, right? So if you're an academic, you know your networks, you know people working in the field. You've got endless writing workshops. You've got endless workshops, well, not endless, but you've got sufficient workshops on how to get published, how to write your dissertation, how to write your article, and then after that, you learn on the job, etc., etc. You go to your mentors, you go to your supervisors, etc., etc. There's a whole network to tell you how to be an academic, right? There is not that network to tell you how to develop your idea. And moreover, as you've seen, these ideas are so diverse, because research is so diverse, that actually it requires quite specialist knowledge to know who to bring in to help you at any particular type of intervention. So that involves dedicated mentorship to support, help validate the idea, or if it has been tested, but just because it's in a peer-reviewed journal doesn't mean there's a market, or doesn't mean somebody else in the market hasn't already thought of it. They just didn't write it up in a peer-reviewed journal. Sure, it might not be as rigorously evidence-based, but actually it can be quite difficult to differentiate in the market actually what is good and what is okay. And I won't go into the market dilemmas and adverse selection here, but it just means you getting that market validation right is very important. Develop the business model, as you've seen, quite a wide variety there, and then support the pitch for funding and investment to get that initiative up to the stage where it might become self-funding, or you get funding through another type of source that I'll go on to. And there are prizes, even better. So the chance to pitch for up to 50k in prize money. So as you can see, what we have been putting through that, and then just some examples from some really recent initiatives which have been supported through ARC. So the first one is good evaluation. This comes from Glasgow. So this is an evidence-based and participatory tool for evaluating the impacts of interventions for social good. So it is has been piloted really in the health sector for evaluating what kind of, I've got identified problem, I want to evaluate intervention, what's my framework for evaluation going to be? And so have developed this tool called a collaborative evaluability assessment CEA, trips off the tongue a little bit easier, which is based in research and practice. So this is peer-reviewed research, and it uses that methodology to provide customized support for programs. As I say, most of these have so far been health interventions in the health sector, and been working so far with the Scottish Government, NHS Scotland, Sustrans, etc., coming out of the Medical and Public Health Sciences Unit at Glasgow University. It's quite interesting, actually, in the public health space. One of the main areas of interdisciplinary work, thinking about those big kind of interdisciplinary in terms of panels, if we're taking in ref speak, looking at a recent analysis of the latest ref returns, actually, was that the highest amount of interdisciplinary research was in the health sector, between social sciences and health, and an awful lot of that in public health. It's a really interesting area of crossover. And as I say, interestingly, to the extent that the ref is at all representative of what actually happens, it's quite interesting that that comes out as an area of where interdisciplinary research is really noticeable. So the second one, back to Oxford, again, host, so double call out. But another evaluation here, different type this time, and this time using data and AI technology. So the first one was very qualitative research, very participatory, how is this for you, etc. This one, absolutely data, AI to evaluate the monetary value of technology or technology-rich startup companies. Now the motivation, so you'll see this comes out of the Department for International Development. So the motivation here was NGOs, charities are buying tech tools, but they don't have the resources to be able to evaluate whether or not this is a good buy or not. And so the motivation was to give them a tool to help them do that, because they don't have the resources of a Deloitte or a McKinsey and all the rest of it to be able to test them and to validate them. So if you can develop a robust, rigorous methodology for evaluating this tool, then they'll know whether what they're buying is good value or not. Now, obviously, there'll be many more interested people who are interested in this tool, because there are many more investors and buyers of companies which are tech or tech-rich startup companies. But that was the initial motivation. So again, you've got rigorous peer-reviewed research there. Their VEST tool has been published in peer-reviewed journals, and it leverages a number of variables, including patent data. And quite, again, so really interesting combination here. So you've got international development, social sciences research, understanding of the problem, understanding the types of solutions that might be needed, blended with those who have skills in technology, maths and AI, to be able to bring those things together to create a really imaginative solution, which is quite a fundable proposition as well, and therefore quite scalable. And then my final example, just to give you a sense again of the range before I cut into some of the insights, this is in the Royal College of Art. So I mentioned that we'd also expanded out to include humanities and the arts. And there's a very, very interesting intersection in the arts, or particularly in design, working with both engineering and health, and a lot, again, in the health space. And this is another health example, which is a digital rehab platform, which pairs technology with clinical expertise to support stroke victims. And essentially, it's like a Fitbit watch. So stroke victims, their electrical impulses to their muscles have been impaired through the stroke. And so what this does, it encourages people as much as possible to manage their own rehab, basically by prompting them to move their arms. So it will, the technology will send a message actually to an app, and the app will then tell you what it is you need to do as a patient to move your arm, or to do whatever rehab exercise you need to do to be able to stimulate the muscle, or in other ways improve your own rehab. So again, working design thinking matched with tech components to create successful user experience, and again founded on published research and developed in partnership with the NHS and others. So again, interesting range of partners, highly bespoke for the initiative at hand. And all of these and more we showcased at a recent reSHAPEing innovation event. We had George Freeman come along, so just say UK Minister for State and Minister of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, George Freeman. He was in post second time, third time, I can't remember. Anyway, he came along. I think it was the first event that he did after he was reinstated, after there was a little bit of confusion about who was the Secretary of State. But anyway, and he was very excited about it. And it was great, actually, it was really exciting. But most importantly, we brought together investor networks and VC companies, as well as the university ventures and stakeholders. So, what have we learned? What are we learning about social science, or I could extend it to shape innovation? So, as I've been saying, involves the mobilisation of research and ideas directly through private and third sectors, rather than indirectly than policymakers. So it's not going to a policymaker saying, I've got this fantastic intervention, you, oh policymaker, now need to go and do something with it. It's recognising actually there are just limits to the capacity of states, of policymakers to actually create interventions. And so just need to go direct, as it were, to direct to market, as it were, or direct to the people who really would benefit from that intervention. Second, we're not talking pills and widgets here necessarily. We're talking often about the creation of intangibles, digital products, services, rather than physical products. So, of course, there might be a physical product there, as we just saw in relation to the kind of Fitbit and the app, but there might not be toolkit, data, methodologies. Relatedly, outputs of social science research, shape research, aren't usually patents, so more often ideas, insights, information, therefore very aligned to services, the knowledge economy. Relatedly, again, the spectrum of routes to commercialisation is very wide, as you can see. Consulting, licensing, social enterprises, for-profit spin-outs, business model is critical. But it can provide new ways to sustain research through creating new data, new sources of funding, and ensure that the impacts are financially sustainable as well as scalable. So some distinctive features continues, not STEM light, but is an activity in its own right. Mention those multiple business models. So often consulting is often overlooked, but consulting isn't necessarily scalable. In fact, when people in policy making circles say to me, but Julia, show me how social science is being commercialised by the private sector, and I'll go, McKinsey's, Deloitte's, Clifford Chance, Accenture, that's consulting. That is consulting at scale. Universities aren't set up to do that, but what we can find and what we can do increasingly is develop, for example, open source toolkits, which then have an additional wraparound consulting. Or as you saw in Place of War, you've got a hub, is it there, that can provide the intelligence and the expertise, etc., so that somebody else can go and implement. Through all licensing, social enterprise, etc., or multiple types of innovation. When it comes to the use, often some of the interventions I've been talking about are quite targeted. Sometimes they're more of a toolkit methodology type of approach, so trying to identify your market. So this is where the professional support teams and the extension of networks is really, really important, because academics won't know necessarily the market. They might do if it's a policy type of intervention, it's a more policy entrepreneurial model, but sometimes they just won't know these types of markets or won't know the possibilities. Your route to market is often shorter. You're not having to, fiddle around in a lab for 5 or 10 years trying to work up that deep research. So route to market can be shorter, but as you've seen in Place of War, for example, that was a project that started back in 2004. So these are all kind of sort of, rather than black and whites. But you can have the potential for kind of parallel, non-intrusive market validation and testing as you are developing the idea, and you can be getting data back the entire time through that process. Don't have that patent wall, so susceptibility to market competition is greater. But as I mentioned before, the competitive advantage should be to be able to mobilise the fact that it is based on social science, rigorous social science methodology. The thing is to make that attractive to the market as a distinctive feature. And then finally, we know there are barriers. We know there are barriers to what we're doing, because I talked about before the fact that we could be enhancing this. So what we're trying to do through Aspect, through the consortium, through the network, is to address some of those. So through the communities of practice that I talked about. We're trying to just improve the awareness of academic and research staff to the opportunities of enhancing research impact in this way. So we'll build cohorts of academics. We're developing, and this I've got to credit to Julian here, the Discover, Launch, Grow, Scale model. I think I've got that right around, in terms of bringing together academics who are quite interested, and this will include early career research students as well, really important as well. We can reach down, hopefully, to PhD students as well, to give them different types of ideas of alternatives about how you disseminate your work. You know, conferences are great, don't get me wrong. We're in one right now. There are really good ways of networking and disseminating your work. But there are other ways of doing that too. So think quite creatively about this and think about how you might do that. And then find other people who are doing it too. And there won't be enough in any one university. Even something the size of Oxford, even at LSE where we are, that's all we do. We don't do anything else other than social sciences. You know, it's hard to not to bump into a social scientist. But even so, we only have small numbers in each place. So you need cohort effects to be able to build that peer network. The second is to enhance the capacity of PS staff to support SHAPE research commercialisation. There's a huge amount that academics need to rely on the skills, knowledge, networks, insights of PS staff in this area. And all too often we find that there just isn't a career track there. There might be in a TT office, but it's kind of, well, I've done life sciences, so I'll leap over into social sciences. And you've seen it's just not the same. It really isn't the same. So just really thinking about building the capacity of PS staff to support this type of activity. And again, therefore, the need for cohort effects, because in every office, there might be 2 or 3 people who do this. So creating, therefore, wider networks of innovators and supporters to share knowledge and ideas, including funding. Okay, seed funding, early stage funding for projects, but that's new ecosystems that need building. New types of mentors, new types of investors, including social impact investors and sustainable philanthropy givers. And one of the other things we're doing in Aspect is building what we're calling an Aspect Angels network of people who really are interested in supporting this type of activity and recognise that actually they are in it for the social impact and there might be a return, but it might not necessarily be the main object of the activity. And as part of that, needless to say, trying to stimulate the discussion and create wider value measurements of value, social, cultural, environmental, as well as jobs and IP returns. So just a canter through what it is that we've been doing. More available, as I say, at a network and a website near you, where we've got, as I say, all the different types of resources. We've got case studies, we've got videos, we've got toolkits, you name it, up there. And as we say, what we are trying to do is create innovative ways of mobilising research for public good. Thank you.